Hey, welcome back to the channel. And yes, I know it's been a little while since I last posted a video, but that's because I've been away on holiday. But today I've got something pretty cool, because if you saw my last video, if you didn't, I'll just link it up above. Basically, in the last video I talked through the Brooklyn Brew Shop Punk IPA kit. And this kit is essentially everything that you need to start brewing as a home brewer. So yeah, I brewed the first batch last week, and I've put this video together to show you in 13 steps how I went from being a complete amateur, knowing nothing about brewing beer, to getting my first brew in the fermenter and currently sat fermenting, waiting to be bottled, which is, yeah, super exciting. And it was super easy. Anyone can do it. So here goes. The very first thing you need to do, and this is the first tip that I have, is to get some sanitizer. And if you use a Brooklyn Brew Shop kit, they'll provide you a packet in that box. But the idea behind the sanitizer is to basically give you some really clean sanitized water that you can use to clean any utensils you're about to use before the brew. Obviously, one of the most important things when it comes to brewing and making beer is consistency, but then also cleanliness. You don't want any dodgy stuff getting in your beer. So the sanitizer and sanitizing the stuff that you use in order to brew the beer is a great first step and a great early tip. If you get yourself a bowl of sanitizer ready, then the stuff that you're going to be using to brew, so whether that's like the spoons, the bowls, any of the stuff that came in the Brooklyn Brew Shop kit, if you get that all set up and ready, and the stuff that you need for the start of this process, get that sanitized, that'll get you ready to go for step one. So the first step is to heat around 2.5 litres of water to 71 degrees Celsius or 160 degrees Fahrenheit. And that's as simple as that, step one. Boom, nailed it. Now once your water's up to temperature, the next thing you need to do is take that big bag of grain, and you're just going to cut the top right off it and empty the contents into your hot water. So now it's really important that you keep an eye on the temperature. You want to keep it between 63 and 68 degrees Celsius or 144 and 152 degrees Fahrenheit. So just make sure, if you've got a thermometer that you can leave on the side, just keep an eye on it, just to make sure you keep it within that range. But yeah, more than likely at this stage of the process, I didn't really need to keep an eye on it that much. I was going back to it every 10 to 20 minutes and just checking up on it, making sure that it was still within that range, and if it had dropped a little bit, just add in a bit of heat until it reached back up to that peak temperature, and then just sat and left it, giving it a quick stir, stuff like that. Once the hour is up and your grain has been cooking for a solid 60 minutes and you've kept it between temperature, basically at this point you just turn the heat up, so you can go up to 77 degrees Celsius or 170 degrees Fahrenheit, and just keep giving it a stir, just give it a good mash. And this is the mashing out process. Really easy to do, and it basically just gets all the grains ready and loose for the next stage. So the next step is the sparge. Now, the sparge is basically like when you brew coffee. So you're basically emptying the grains out into a container, but that container needs to be a strainer, or maybe if you use what I did, I had a straining bag. And effectively the idea is you pour the grains in and you prevent the grains going into the pot, but you collect all the liquid underneath. And that liquid is going to be the beer. So now at this stage I used a straining bag, like I said, and I'll link everything that I've used down below so you can get a good idea of what it is that I've used. But yeah, you pour the grains into the bag, all the liquid soaks through into the pot underneath, And the idea is that you repeat this process a couple of times. So basically what I did is I poured all the mash and the liquid that was in there through into the pot, collected the water at the bottom, and then just measured how much I'd collected. So you need to collect 4.75 litres at this point. So in order to top it up, you just need to heat some extra water up on the side, and just make sure, again, you leave your grains sat over the top of the bowl and you pour some water in over the top, so again that water runs through the grains and collects the good stuff. Until you've got the 4.75 litres. Once you've got that, just run the whole thing together, all back through over the top of the grains again. So you're going to need to find yourself a couple of bowls so you can keep switching the grains and the liquids between each of them. But once you've got it all ran through, you are ready for the next step. So the next step is super easy. It's the boil, and it's exactly what it says on the tin. You literally need to put your wort that you've just strained through your grains and put that back on the heat, bring it up to boil, so bring it up till you see a foam come on the top of the beer, and once that's foaming away, just drop the temperature down a little bit. And again, you want to keep this at a low boil, so you don't want it to be bubbling away too ferociously, and you definitely don't want it bubbling over the top. You just want to keep it at a fairly low, consistent boil for a good 60 minutes. And at this point, you just keep an eye on the timing. So obviously, again, it's going to be boiling for 60 minutes, but at certain parts in this process, we're going to be adding the hops. So once your beer's reached that boiling point and it's bubbling away nicely, like I said, just reduce the heat to the simmer, and it's at this point that you just need to add 5 or so pellets of the Atonum hops. Give them a quick stir, and you can go sit down and relax, grab yourself a beer for a few minutes, because you're doing nothing until another 45 minutes into the boil. So once that 45 minutes is up, you need to add 2/3 of the Chinook hops. And then another 3/5 of what's left of the Atonum hops. So that's at 45 minutes into the boil. And once the 60 minutes is up in total, add all the remaining hops. That's including the rest of the Chinook and the Atonum hops that you've got left. And then the Simcoe hops as well. At this point, you'll notice that a lot of the wort has evaporated. That's totally normal. Obviously, you've been boiling the liquid, so at this point, you should be left with hopefully around a gallon worth. Which is why we put in a little bit extra to begin with, so that evaporation can take place with no worries. But yeah, don't worry if you've got less than that, you've got more than that, that can all be resolved in the next step. Right, so now you've finished with the boil, the next thing you need to do is to cool this beer down. We can't add it to the fermenter at this point whilst it's too hot. And you definitely don't want to be adding yeast to it whilst it's this hot either. So we need to cool it down to about 21 degrees Celsius. Or 70 degrees Fahrenheit. So to do this, I simply added the pot to a sink full of cold water, and it had ice blocks in it as well. So this cooling might take a while, so again, it's probably best here to just chill out for a while and leave your thermometer in the top just so you can get a good reading of how cold the beer has actually got. You want to make sure that this does come all the way down to 21 degrees Celsius. or that's 70 Fahrenheit, before we go on to the next step. So just, yeah, be patient at this point and just make sure that the beer is cooled properly. So once it's cooled, it's now time to get the beer into the carboy or the demijohn or the fermenting jug or whatever it is you want to call it. We need to get the beer out of the pot and into that fermenting vessel. So to do this, I highly recommend using a funnel and also a small strainer over the top just to catch anything residuals that are left in the beer at this point. And you simply just pour that in. You might need to get someone to give you a hand here. I did. Doing this solo at this point is probably not great, especially when the risk is that you lose all your beer. It's probably not worth it. So get someone to help you out just to hold the strainer and the funnel over the top whilst you pour the beer in. So as you're pouring it through, you'll notice that some of the stuff might get stuck in the top of the strainer, which is preventing the liquid coming through. So here's just to solve this. We just quickly got a spoon that we had sanitized, and again we just stirred as we were adding the water just to make sure all the liquid was getting through the top. Don't want to lose any of that good beer. And just check that you've got at least a gallon's worth in the bottle. Most bottles like this of this size, the one that you get from Brooklyn Brew Shop, has a mark on it that tells you where the gallon point is. So if you need to top it up, now's the time to just add a little bit of extra water to this. So at this point we pitch the yeast, and this is very important because this is the part that will effectively turn the liquid we just made into alcohol. So to do that, you just take the whole packet that you get in the Brooklyn Brew Shop kit. Again, you just snip it open and just pour the whole thing in. Make sure you sanitize your hand, so just dip your hand in some sanitizer so you can put that on the top of the bottle without putting the lid on, because at this point you want to shake the bottle aggressively. So yeah, just make sure you sanitize your hand before you do so, just so there's nothing on your hand that could affect the rim of the bottle or the beer as it's going against it. And then you just want to give it a quick shake to basically activate the yeast and just make sure it's all mixed in properly. And that is effectively it. Final step that I recommend doing is to then make yourself a blow-off tube. So this here will effectively, in the first few days of fermentation, just prevent you having an explosion and your bottle just being, well, just blown to pieces, and your beer just being all over the floor and in a mess. So obviously at this point, because you've shaken the bottle up, you've got the yeast active, and that yeast is going to go to work and it's going to start creating bubbles. And what you don't want is all that pressure to build up inside the bottle, which will then eventually cause an explosion. So to stop this, make sure you sanitize the top and the tubing that you get provided in the box. Screw the top on and put the tube into the top of the bottle, and then just rest the other end of the tube into a small bowl of sanitizer. And that is effectively a blow-off tube, and that will basically let the carbon dioxide escape into the sanitized water, and you'll, after a day or so, so in my instance, I left it overnight at that point, and when I came back to it in the morning, it was already like ticking away. You could hear the bubbles coming out fairly rapidly into the bowl of sanitizer, and obviously that was just making a little like ticking noise in the bottle as the bubbles were escaping. And that continued for about 2 to 3 days, at which point it had settled quite nicely. It wasn't so aggressive anymore, it wasn't bubbling as much. I took the blow-off tube out and then sanitized the airlock that you get. So this is just a small little stopper that you put in the top of the bottle. You just need to fill it 2/3 of the way up with some sanitizer, and make sure the whole thing is sanitized itself, and then just pop it into the top and leave it. And that is where I am right now. So my beer is sat, it is chilling, and it is fermenting away, and I've got a week or so left before I need to bottle it. So if you're not already, make sure you subscribe to the channel to keep up to date when I walk through the next step, which will be bottling after the beer is fermented. If you have any questions about this whatsoever, hit them down in the comments below. I'll happily respond. As I said, this is my first time doing this, but I found it fairly simple. The instructions that Brooklyn Brew Shop gave were great. So far looks so good. Everything looks like it's gone to plan. Everything looks like it did, based on what the instructions they give and based on videos I've seen myself. So yeah, so far I'm feeling fairly confident that I'm going to get some good beer out of this. So yeah, if you do have any questions, just hit them down below and make sure you hit that subscribe button on your way down so you do not miss the next video on the bottling process. That's been it for today. Thanks very much for watching. Cheers.